Zach, are you ready to get to some AP poll action?
I hate the AP poll, but sure.
I think they got better this week, didn't they?
Missouri's in it.
That's true. They are sticking up for James Madison, though. James Madison, right behind Michigan, number 19 and 18. I think Michigan would absolutely destroy James Madison, but
I think
that's
you're
just
right.
me. That's just me. All right. So the AP poll, obviously, the big mover is Texas A&M. They lost, and the AP poll has been giving more respect to Oregon, which I am completely in favor of. And so that I do like that about the AP poll, but we'll see how it works out. So the AP poll has number 1, Ohio State, number 2, Indiana. I almost said Iowa. Iowa's not number 2. Georgia, Oregon, Texas Tech, number 6, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Alabama, number 11, BYU, followed by Miami, Vanderbilt, Texas at 14, Utah, and then at number 16, Virginia. There's no way they would beat USC. All right, USC is number 17. They need to flip that right now. There is no way on God's green earth that Virginia would beat USC. Followed by Michigan, James Madison, North Texas, and then at 21, Tulane, Arizona, Navy, Georgia Tech, Missouri. AP poll likes Group of Five. College football playoff does not like Group of Five, right, Zach?
Yes, agreed.
But the college football playoff could be forced to have 2 Group of Five champions in if Duke wins the ACC, which would be hilarious.
Yes. I wonder if there'd be an emergency protocol where if you and I would be in favor of this to be like we have an ACC team that is higher ranked that because of a technicality like couldn't be in or couldn't be in their championship game, and so we're just going to give it to Miami.
Well, that's what they were talking about. As they were saying, could the ACC like basically redo their own rules and put Miami in the ACC championship game, similar to how the Big Ten did it with Ohio State and um, COVID? Which I think that's a little bit different because it was COVID and nobody really knew what they were doing. They were just making up
Yeah.
arbitrary rules and hoping for the best. But and also like Ohio State beat Indiana. I think it'd be different. Like Miami and Duke didn't play this season,
They did
right?
not play.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think it'd be different if there was some kind of thing that put them together and Miami beat Duke, but that was the whole thing was it was either Ohio State or Indiana in the Big Ten championship, but Ohio State beat Indiana, so it was like, okay, are we really going to keep them out because they played not the games when
Yeah. I
yeah.
I really hate that in none of the tiebreakers um that and this is true not just for the ACC, but a lot of the time like this could happen in the Big 10 one of these days. And I don't think it means I think the Big 10 has too many good teams that they'll never be in danger of not getting an ACC or like getting a team in.
Mhm.
But like the tiebreaker situation, one, I this is where I really do agree with college football nerds is that the way that conferences have expanded, they have not thought it through of how it impacts these conference championship races and how it then impacts the playoff. There's no reason that Duke should be at all considered. And the only reason why they're in the ACC championship game is because of a technicality that Miami could not control, which is there's like who they played. And
I
I sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say the only thing I would say was that this isn't completely like every other conference because you did have like ACC teams play ACC teams this year that did not count as conference games, right? Like NC State played Duke and that didn't count as a conference game. Like there was some really
Just
really weird
so
stuff, and then you
stupid.
also have like the Notre Dame stuff going on. Like this ACC conference is completely mismanaged. Okay, and you don't have any clear national championship contenders. Even Miami is not a national championship contender at this point. So that's how you're left with a Miami who's ranked 12th. They should be ranked above Notre Dame in my opinion, but
Yep.
timing of your loss means something, which I don't think it should, unless
No.
there's certain stuff going on like injuries and stuff like that maybe. But I'm not advocating for a Florida State situation, but I would say that like if anyway we don't need to go on that. But I'm just saying I understand what the college football playoff nerds are talking about, but I also think that they are talking about that in a way of saying you can't have automatic qualifiers for conferences, which I completely disagree with
Yeah, I don't agree with
because
that point.
yeah, because even if you have an Indiana or something like that's their whole thing is they're trying to say like Indiana should have never been in the playoffs, and if we have automatic qualifiers, a team like Indiana will get in from the Big Ten every single year. But I never agreed that Indiana shouldn't have been in. I always thought Indiana should have been in. And we're talking about last year, obviously not this year. At least that's from when I've heard them talk about it. That's kind of the angle that it seemed like. If I'm misrepresenting their point, I apologize. But that was kind of the angle that I've always thought they were coming from. But I would say I don't think it'll happen in the Big Ten because the Big Ten actually has, national championship contenders in their conference. And so if a team like Duke were to get to the Big Ten championship game, it would be like Michigan or USC there, where they would win and get in, which I think is more exciting because you already
Mhm.
have three Big Ten teams that are in there, and you could possibly get a fourth if they upset one of them, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I think there's a year where you could have just a bloodbath. Like I think next year could be one of those years because you look at some of the games that are going to be played. Um, you look at Ohio State's schedule, you look at Oregon's schedule. Like there's going to be a lot of teams beating each other up, and I think you could have 4 or 5 teams at 7-2 in the conference, and you're like, all right, who goes? And there's a reality that if you have that many teams at 7-2 in the conference, them getting into that game might someone getting barred from that game, excuse me, might be their death knell, despite the fact that maybe they deserve it more than someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think I do think this the way that conferences are structured, I honestly would go back to the division model. Um, I don't
If
love that
if
we
they're
got rid
if
of
there's
divisions.
like if they're organized properly, sure, but you can't put
Yeah.
Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn. Like we do that, and we have Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, USC, and Oregon, you know, all in one division. That would be
Well, no,
absolutely
yeah,
terrible.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
we'd have to figure out a better way. I would be in favor of if the division's mixed up every year, right? Like
Yeah.
based off what the standings were last year. Okay, you're in this division now. You go down the order. It's every other. Like I think that kind of stuff would work out really well personally. Um, but at the same time, I think
Yeah.
all this is just leading to, you know, conference playoffs eventually is what we're going to
Yeah.
get,
I think so. I
which
agree.
I don't necessarily want. And that's another reason why I want these automatic qualifiers because at some point we're going to get to like conference playoff games and all this stuff. And it's not going to be college football. So I understand people saying like, you don't want the 2014 playoffs and all this stuff, but the committee does not do a very good job. In my opinion, number one, there's too much parity in college football nowadays to really be able to only have 12 teams in the playoff. But anyway, I don't need to go on my rant about that. Zeke is saying, according to AI, it must be true that the ACC could be left out of the college football playoff entirely if the
Yep.
champion is not among the five highest ranked conference champions. They are correct. So it is not the Power Four conference champions are not guaranteed a spot. It is the highest ranked five conference champions. So the a big thing is that the only G5 team that's ranked in the college football playoff rankings right now is Tulane. I believe they're at number 24. Correct me if I'm wrong, Zach. If they win the American, they're in. But depending on what team would be behind them, right, like a James Madison or something like that, they would be able to get in if they were ranked above Duke. The problem is right now is we neither Duke or another G5 team is ranked. So we don't
Mhm.
know. But you would think, based off the AP poll here, that James Madison would be getting more consideration for the college football playoff rankings than, a Duke would. Especially since
Yeah.
you have teams that are 8-4 in the Big Ten that aren't ranked or not ranked in the AP poll. We'll see what happens in the college football playoff rankings. Which, all right, we're going to talk about Texas A&M here in a minute. Give me some rapid fire gripes here, really fast, Zach. Missouri, number 25. They have not beaten a bowl eligible team all season long. They've not beaten a single team with a winning record. Not even a 6-6 record this season.
Yep.
They're number 25 at 8-4. You're gonna leave out Iowa, Illinois. I get Washington just lost, so you're not gonna put them in there. Like you're not gonna move Washington up for losing. But you really think Missouri would give Oregon a game, 14-26? Oregon would throttle them. All right. And I know I'm speaking SEC hypotheticals here, but let's be honest. There's no way that Missouri would beat Oregon. I'm sorry.
I
There's no reason why Missouri should be in the AP poll top 25 over Iowa, Illinois. Like I said, I get Washington because Washington lost. They're not going to move up in after they lose, but still.
Iowa's beaten more teams over 500 than Missouri. Illinois has
Pretty sure they have a
beaten.
tougher strength of schedule than Missouri too. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Illinois has beat an ACC championship participant in Duke by 26.
Possible playoff team.
They beat USC at home. Like they have better wins. Like, why are you not putting those two teams there? I know it's number 25, but it's more just the SEC bias is just stupid. Like, what are we doing?
Iowa has a better strength of record than Missouri.
Yeah.
So, and if you go to strength of schedule, Missouri's is 23, Iowa's is 17th.
Yeah.
Illinois is 21st. So,
yeah. You know, I will. Here's the other thing that I think is a gripe, and it's not Big Ten related. I get that Miami lost a couple of games in the ACC that you're like, oh, you shouldn't have lost those. They just beat a ranked team on the. Oh, they're not ranked anymore.
They beat them good
throttled.
too.
They throttled Pitt at Pitt. Oklahoma struggled against, honestly, an incompetent LSU team with an incompetent quarterback. They beat Notre Dame. Why is Miami 12th? Why are they not 9th?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean,
like, and I'm not a Miami fan at all. Like, I do not like Miami. Like, I've made fun of them on this show, but there is no reason why they should not be at least 9th, if not 8th.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Notre Dame should be as high as they are. I do think Notre Dame is probably a team that is capable of making a run in the playoffs, but I've not seen that from them in their resume, right? They lost to Texas A&M, they lost to Miami. Their best win is USC, which don't get me wrong, is a good win, but that was also at home, right? Miami went on the road and beat a Pitt team that, yes, they aren't ranked anymore, but Miami has better wins than I shouldn't say a better win, but they have some of their wins are better than what Notre Dame has. Notre Dame
they beat Notre Dame. Like that is the best win.
Exactly. So that's what I was saying. It was like, how do you have a better win if it's on that team? Yes, but also it's kind of weird. But overall, the head-to-head has to matter, and that's the most infuriating thing. Is the College Football Playoff Committee wants to honor these head-to-heads, but then when it gets down to it, with a team like Miami and Notre Dame, they don't, and it's just one more reason why I think we need automatic qualifiers. And I think it's purely because of when they lost, right? Notre Dame lost their first 2 games, so they're fine. Mm-hmm. But Miami loses later on in the season, albeit to worse teams, but they also beat the other team. And the strength of schedule is basically the same. Notre Dame is 42, Miami's 44.
There's
you have the
no
win
reason.
over them.
There's literally. And I think the thing that'll drive me nuts about the CFP is that while I am arguing for Miami right now, they have staked their claim and said, well, we think Notre Dame's better. What's going to change their minds? Like if Miami magically ends up over Notre Dame next week, I'm going to have just as much of a problem with that. Not because I don't think it shouldn't happen, but it's like, why wasn't that your process to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, to me, that makes you less trustworthy. So I feel like, I know this is a discussion about the AP poll, where I do think things have to fluctuate, and I think that matters. But I think, like, I want the CFP to be consistent, and they're not consistent. And they've backed themselves into a corner because they said, well, strength is, or head to head's only going to matter when they're of equal importance. And my argument to that is, at what point has Notre Dame showed themselves to be vastly superior to Miami?
They haven't. They haven't. So I totally agree. We're gonna get to Texas A&M and Ole Miss here in just a second. We're gonna save Ole Miss for last because we're gonna use that to go into our conversation about Lane Kiffin and everything. But Zach, are you of the same opinion as me that USC at 17 is a travesty? And they're probably going to be about that in the college football playoff rankings as well.
Um, it's stupid.
I don't think they should be behind Virginia. I don't think they should be behind Utah. I think they should be right there with Texas. Probably not above Texas because Texas has the win over Texas A&M, who is ranked higher. While I don't
Yeah.
think Texas A&M deserved to be ranked that high. They were undefeated, so they were up there. It is what it is. USC doesn't have a win like that, so I'm fine with them not being above Texas, but I don't think they should be behind Utah or Virginia.
They should be 15th.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, like, Virginia has not done anything. Like, Virginia continues to be propped up by their win against Florida State.
Well, and I do think that like at some point these close games have to matter, right?
Yep.
Beating team like close having close wins over teams should not you should not get as much credit for those. Albeit they beat Virginia Tech and Duke both by multiple scores here recently, so I get it. Which maybe that's the thing that they could use is that Virginia already beat Duke at Duke, so maybe Duke doesn't get in the the ACC championship game because they already faced them. I don't
Well,
know.
I'm pretty sure they already set the game.
Yeah, I think they already said it, so I don't think there's anything to play with it. Um, but you beat North Carolina by 1. You beat Washington State by 2 at home. Washington State went across the country to play you. You beat them by 2. I get it. You won at Louisville, but Louisville's not even ranked anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So you lost to Wake Forest. You couldn't even score 10 points on Wake Forest. Don't get me wrong, the Wake Forest coach, I think he's new this year. He's done a good job with the team, but I don't understand how anybody could look at this Virginia team and say, yeah, they're better than USC. Or the Utah team and say, yeah, Utah's better than USC. I just don't get it. But anyway, any other thoughts on that before we talk Texas A&M?
Nope.
Okay, so let's talk Texas A&M. Not so much their role in the AP poll, but kind of where do we think they're going to end up? Obviously, they were number 3, and they've dropped down to number 7 here. Do you think we'll see a similar place for them in the college football playoff rankings? Remember, the college football playoff rankings will most likely have it be Texas Tech, Ole Miss, Oregon, instead of Oregon, Texas Tech, Ole Miss.
I think so. Because I just don't think Texas A&M's resume is not, it's not good. And like, they have a good win against Notre Dame on the road. Like, that is a great win. Outside of that, they've got nothing. And they lost to the only good SEC team they played. The only team in the top half of the SEC rankings they lost to by multiple scores. Granted, on the road, but they've struggled mightily with South Carolina, who just got beat by Clemson. I believe they struggled against Kentucky, right? Or is that?
I think you're right. They did.
You have to.
Yeah, they did beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame.
Yes.
which
Good win. Very good
everybody in the
win.
chat is kind of disagreeing with us on Notre Dame in Miami, and that's fine. But if that's, and I'm not saying anybody disagrees with us here on Texas A&M, but if that is the thought process that people have is like, well, Notre Dame's a far better team than they were at the beginning of the season, then it's like, okay, how are you actually giving credit to Texas A&M for beating Notre Dame then if you think Notre Dame is a much better team than they were? Like, I get Notre Dame has 2 losses, so Texas A&M's not going to be behind them. But if you have that same thought process with Miami, you should have that same thought process with Texas A&M. And that's really the biggest issue here is that the college football playoff committee is not ranking based on who is the best team, which is what they're supposed to do. They're saying, how many losses do you have? Okay, we're going to put you in this little area, and then we're going to rank who we think the best teams are based on the teams that have 2 losses, based on the teams that have 1 loss, right? Head to head when it fits us here and there. But BYU, you get screwed, and Texas, you're a big brand in the SEC, so we're going to move you up a little bit more, right? Like, it's just like picks and choose. It's not consistent, and so I think that's the hardest thing with trying to predict where Texas A&M goes here. I think Texas A&M will most likely be 1 spot behind Oregon, as they should be behind Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
But I would not be surprised at all if you see Texas Tech 4, Ole Miss 5, Oregon 6, Texas A&M 7, or Texas A&M 6, Oregon 7, which I think would be terrible if that happens. But based off the way the committee has treated Oregon, they are obviously not impressed with Oregon.
I forget where's Oregon was 6th last week, weren't they?
So they were behind Texas Tech and Ole Miss.
They were behind Ole Miss last week,
right? Or was I making that up?
I think they were above Ole Miss.
Did they move above them finally?
Yeah, they're above Ole Miss, and they'll stay
so
above Ole Miss.
So they moved above Ole Miss last week. Okay.
I think Oregon's firmly 5th.
Okay.
Like I don't, and I think you could make a well here. So here's what I think is a scenario. I don't think it's going to happen. But say Georgia loses to Alabama, or Texas Tech loses to BYU. I think you have a case for 3 Big Ten teams getting the buys, getting 3 of the 4 buys. I know you said that it probably won't happen, but if Texas Tech loses or Georgia loses their conference championship games.
Yeah, but if Georgia loses to Alabama, they're just going to put Alabama in the top 4.
I don't think so.
I don't
not as a 2-loss.
I don't think they're going to let an SEC champion not have a bye.
I think you're nuts if you let Alabama with a loss to 5-7 Florida State.
But they obviously don't care about it. They had Alabama at 4 before they lost to Oklahoma.
They have them 10th.
Yeah, but if they beat Georgia,
I don't think that's going to be able to. I don't think you're going to be able to catapult Alabama all the way to the 3 spot or the 4 spot if they beat Georgia. Not with 2 losses, not with a loss to Oklahoma.
I just think Greg Sankey would kill somebody if they don't.
Well, Greg Sankey can do whatever he wants.
Look, I have been better with I've had better feelings about the SEC bias with the college football playoffs this year. I still think they give too much credit to certain teams like Texas A&M, having them all the way up there. I still think that a team like Oregon should have been above Texas A&M with their only loss being to Indiana, but it is what it is. And they did move up Oregon, like you said, above Ole Miss, so I'm thankful for that. But I still think that there is a hint of SEC bias, and I just cannot see the committee leaving an SEC champion out of the top 4. I agree with you; it would be ridiculous, but I cannot see them not doing it.
Yeah, I think it would be hard. I just don't know. I don't know how you could justify keeping Georgia there or putting Alabama there with their body of work.
Well, I think you justify it and you say, well, Alabama had all these ranked wins. Missouri, they're ranked. They beat Missouri. They beat Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's right outside of the playoffs. They beat Georgia twice. Georgia was number 3 team.
But again, you're like, the thing that you have to think about though is the consistency of the committee, right? Like the way that they've ranked now, they they haven't had to deal with this yet, right? Because a year ago it was, if you lose your conference championship game, you automatically don't get a bye, right? Like the conference championship meant something to get a bye.
Mm-hmm.
Which I actually don't love that they did away with that, because I think people are saying Ohio State, Indiana doesn't matter. I think it matters a ton. Like, maybe not for the CFP, but I think there's a lot of implications from program trajectory standpoint that I think are awesome.
Yeah, it matters. It matters. It just doesn't matter, and like the seeding isn't going to make the playoffs or anything like that.
Yeah. But
That's the
I
thing.
wish that was another carrot that was in there. Like, whoever wins this game gets the bye.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see how the committee seeds it. You're probably like, I wouldn't expect that to happen, but I'm just saying, I think there is a chance that Oregon could get the 4 spot.
Doc says if Indiana beat Ohio State close, then Ohio State would still get a bye. I agree. It doesn't.
Yes.
Whoever wins that game, even if Ohio State beats Indiana by 2 scores or Indiana beats Ohio State by 2 scores, I don't think either of them fall out of the top 4. I think you
Yeah.
probably see whoever wins number 1 and the other one number 3. If Georgia beats Alabama, you probably see them number 3,
Mm-hmm.
and then you probably see Texas Tech at 4 and Oregon at 5.
Yep.
Now, if Alabama wins, who knows? You could get 4 teams in there. I don't disagree with you, Zach. I think that should be what happens, but I just, you know, Greg Sankey's gonna blow a gasket if the SEC champion is not in the top 4.
Good.
He's gonna pass out another pamphlet at the spring meetings.
Good. We
do,
don't
do
care.
So the AP poll obviously did not do anything to Ole Miss, which is not surprising because the AP poll has to get their votes in before they probably knew everything that was happening with Ole Miss. It was all rumors, and they're not going to base this stuff off of rumors. But now, 2 days ahead of time, Lane Kiffin leaves Ole Miss, takes, I believe, Charlie Weiss Jr. with him to LSU and possibly some other offensive staff members. Listen, Florida State missed the playoffs completely because of an injured quarterback. Could we see Ole Miss A, miss the playoffs, or B, fall lower in the playoffs for losing their head coach? They made Pete Golding the official head coach. He's not even the interim. They made Pete Golding the official head coach.
So I want to remain consistent. I hated what they did to Florida State 2 years ago. It was 2 years ago that happened.
3.
I hated what they did.
No,
I think it
2.
was.
Sorry, you're right.
I think it was absolutely ridiculous. And I think what they did was they set the precedent that they can look at a team and predetermine your worthiness after you have, like, based on an injury. And listen, they had something to go off of. So a lot of people justified it because they saw them play without Jordan Travis. They did not look like themselves, which made sense. But also they were talking about it even before he got hurt, that Florida State could miss the playoff. And I thought that was inappropriate. And then their quarterback got hurt. And then they talked about how they should miss the playoff. And they did. It was very media driven. I don't think there's a chance that Ole Miss might drop, which I think, again, I don't think would be fair. But I don't think they're going to miss the playoffs entirely. They have nothing to go off of in terms of what their future performance would be. And then personally, I just don't think it's right. I don't think you can judge because, like, if we're talking about the playoff is meant to be a competition for the best teams of this year, and we have completed the regular season, and we have deemed Ole Miss the 6th best team up to this point, then you got to stick with that. Like, I don't care what their future performance might be based off of this coaching change, but Ole Miss I think has to stay there, and you just have to let them ride it out.
Bobby Mack with the $2 super chat. Appreciate you, Bobby Mack. He says BYU upsets Texas Tech. Would that knock them out? I don't think
Good
so
question.
because they've talked about how they're not going to penalize teams too much for losing the conference championship game because no, like other teams don't play a game, right? And we saw it last year. Like SMU wasn't penalized for losing to Clemson and everything. So it I do not think that BYU upsetting Texas Tech would knock them out of the playoffs. They might drop a spot or two, but I actually think if they do, I think Texas Tech would probably stay above everybody, and you would just see BYU jump in to the playoffs and maybe even jump in above Texas Tech. But
Mm-hmm.
Texas Tech also beat BYU already once, so maybe they would just jump into the playoffs. I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of movement of teams in the conference championship games with teams that don't play in conference championship games. Because
Mm-hmm.
last year, Ohio State beat Penn State. Penn State lost the conference championship game, and Penn State still stayed above Ohio State in the rankings. And the whole thought process was, well, Ohio State didn't play.
Mm-hmm.
You can't overly punish a team for losing when the other teams aren't playing. You have any differing thoughts? You think I'm right, wrong?
No, no, I think you're right.
Okay. So that would be my take on it, Bobby, just from past. But as we're talking about right now, with Ole Miss and Florida State, the committee does not always remain consistent. And to me, I agree with you, Zach, on Ole Miss. I don't think that they should drop because they lost their coach. But in order to stay consistent, and this is one of my biggest issues with the College Football Playoff Committee, is that they're not consistent because you have a different committee every year, right? And you can still give them the same rules and say abide by these rules, but it's like the AP poll voters. They give the AP poll voters rules to follow, but they never actually follow them. Like most people do, but most people are out here like I'm just gonna put in a bracket whatever I want. Who cares what the AP poll rules say, right? And that's kind of the issue here is that what they need to have is they need to have rules to abide by for the committee every single year, but even though you have those rules, they don't always abide by them.
Yep.
So if they did that to Florida State, they should drop Ole Miss like they dropped Florida State, but they're not going to. I don't think. So Heather Dinich said that she thinks that Ole Miss would be punished in the rankings. She's not saying they wouldn't make it, but she said that it would impact their rankings. The Athletic said that Kiffin leaving should have no effect on how the selection committee evaluates Ole Miss. So different media sources here are saying different things on this. So we have no idea.
Yeah. I think if they drop, I think you got. I think we just got to blow this thing. Not blow it up, but completely change how we think about the protocols for how we select the teams, because it's like let's go to high school football for a minute. If you have a coach that has to step down because he has an illness halfway through or like at the end of the regular season, does that change their seeding for their districts and for their state title game? Like, no. So, like, why, like NFL, same thing. Why is it determining the seeding? Like, this is going to happen more, right? Like, we're going to see more coaches move on. We're going to see players sit out more often.
The only thing I would say to what you're saying is that teams do get ranked based off their coaches a lot of the time. Like the
Which
fact
I
that you have
understand.
a coach with a national championship in Georgia has you automatically supplanted as the best team with one loss because your coach is Kirby Smart. Now they have wins and stuff like that, yes, but they are always going to get the benefit of the doubt because they have Kirby Smart. So if they are ranking teams that way, like I hear you. I do not want this to happen. I don't want Ole Miss to, drop. I think Ole Miss should drop because they're not a very good football team, personally. I mean,
Yeah.
I shouldn't say they're not a very good football team. They're not a. I don't think they're a playoff caliber football team.
Yeah.
But that obviously their record says different, so they're going to be in there. But I think if you rank teams based off of coach, which does happen, I think it's fair to drop teams if they don't have their coach and if they don't have some of their other staff members too. Charlie Weiss Jr. followed Lane
Yep.
Kiffin. Like, they don't have their offense coordinator. They don't have their head coach. And let's be honest, Ole Miss's defense, not good. Like, I know they just put Pete Golding up there and everybody's loving Pete Golding now, but he does not have a very good defense.
I get it. I'm just saying, I think if you've evaluated Ole Miss the way that you have, and I know that this is not, that this is just me. I'm going to stick my feet into this. Like, my conviction is it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, and I hear you. I don't want
Yeah.
it to be that way either, but like I said, they did it before once with a quarterback. And if you rank based off of coach before, plays into it. So it's a terrible situation.
Can we keep Ole Miss secured and just ban Lane Kiffin from the playoff?